All right, Tabitha Taylor, thank you so much for coming on the Dr. Tina Show. You are a lawyer that I have been following on Instagram on the topic of peptides, and you are the gal that I have been waiting for. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to kind of just share whatever information can really be valuable. And I love that I've looked into your platform and your previous content, and it really aligns with the message that we're trying to get across in our business.
Awesome. So tell the audience a bit about who you are and how you got into this.
Yeah, so I'm a Florida-based licensed attorney. We do consulting for medical aesthetic practices throughout the U.S. And I've never seen any other company that does it. Maybe there is, but all we do is medical aesthetics. And takes a little bit of wellness. And I know now aesthetics is vague. There's no universal definition, but we really have made it a mission to help providers understand the rules. It is just so against our ethics that you can get in trouble, get your license taken away for breaking rules that nobody tells you what the rules are. So that's really kind of how we got into it. I started as a corporate transactional attorney, and one of my clients just happened to be a med spa. And we were doing something unrelated for, a contract for her. And she was asking questions. And then we started getting more and more med spas for business matters. And they were all asking the same questions. And I was like, there's no answer for you guys. And so that's kind of how we just said, this is going to be our mission. And, if we can somehow get a universal national standard in place, amazing. That's like pie in the sky dream of mine, is to spearhead that. But right now our company is just helping providers understand the regulations.
I love this because a lot of providers listen to this podcast, and since 2023, when we lost access to be able to prescribe a lot of peptides, you and I were talking offline, like the inmates are running the asylum and things have just gone crazy off the rails. And I think there's a lot of gray zone, and I think there's a lot of doctors practicing in that gray zone, and based on what I've been observing in the media and seeing some of the crackdowns that are currently happening that are really seeming to ramp up with the FDA, these folks are going to get themselves into hot water. And so I thought perhaps twofold, my practitioners and health professionals listening to this will glean some advice. And then secondarily, the patients and the general population listening to this will understand what's happening across the board maybe a bit better so they can navigate this a bit more cleanly, because it's the Wild West out there.
It is. I have to say, to protect my own license, everything that I say here today is just educational, no legal advice, no attorney-client relationship. A lot of this is my own opinions. You just have to give that disclaimer. Every lawyer has to give a disclaimer.
Oh, I give it at the beginning and end. It's all over my podcast. I get it. It's in my show notes. This is educational only. Okay, so the first thing, I found your account, and you are talking about the legalities of peptides. But before we get into that, you and I, before we jumped on here, we're talking about how we both had been censored so heavily on this topic. I was wondering if you wanted to share at all about what's happening. You seem to be getting flagged, you said, over on different platforms.
Yeah, mainly TikTok. Instagram has been okay. I think I've gotten one warning from them. But it really started with the conversation of peptides. And my whole purpose is just education. I'm not telling you can do this, or here's how to do it, here's how to get away with the rules. Here's an interpretation of what the rules currently are. Here's where there are no rules, where it's gray. Our job as lawyers is to, when there is nothing that's really, that we call it on point, there's nothing that's clear, pull from others and say, okay, well, here's an analogous situation. Here's another set of facts that match. And basically hypothesize how the courts are going to ultimately rule on this particular situation. It's like an educated guess. But when I started doing that, I started noticing my views would drop. And I was like, what's going on here? I'd get 10 views when I went from 10,000 views. And then I would try to boost the post. Okay, maybe I just need to pay for, nope, it would get declined. And then I started getting strikes on it. And I'm like, I appealed. They're saying I'm selling it. I'm like, I'm not selling it. No links are on any of my pages. I don't understand. And so I just got to become very creative. Me and the team have become very creative in how we speak about these and the captions. Because, it's not just what you say. It's also what's in your captions, in the actual image, all of these different things that it reads. So Fingers crossed I don't get banned, but I'm on like my second strike.
It's insane. And it's happening to doctors I know who are very anti-peptide. They're just trying to educate the public on their side of things. And so this isn't a pro or anti-peptide thing. Like the word peptide's just getting everybody banned and everybody in trouble. So you're in good company. Okay, so let's back up. I mentioned 2023, the fall of 2023, we lost access to prescribing a bunch of peptides. Can you kind of explain what that was and where we are now?
Yeah, so there's different categories. I mean, there's a million different categories, but the two main categories that were the topic of conversation here is category 1 and category 2 substances. And category 1, when you're not FDA approved, category 1 is basically the FDA saying like, we're not giving you the green light, but we'll tolerate you for right now. And category 2 is essentially there are some significant safety concerns. We are not going to give permission for this one. And that one is a clear no. And so a lot of these got put onto, I think it was 21 or 22 different ones got put onto category 2. And now recently, they got taken off. But then there's the misconception of, okay, well, now they're in category 1, so it's tolerable. And that's not the case. So that's really where everything kind of started.
So that's not the case. So this meeting that just happened at the end of June, the PCAC meeting, and some of these were not FDA approved, but they were positioned differently. So where do they stand now? Can we prescribe these as physicians, or am I able to prescribe BPC 157 and these others in injectable form?
So those are two different legal analyses. And this is the part that I think is more difficult for providers to understand. Can you do something is two different questions. Can you do it within the scope of your license? And can you get sued for it? And even with this, I'm sure we'll get into it with the, Retta lawsuits this week. It's the same thing, is you can mitigate your risk from a compliance standpoint. So can you as a provider prescribe it? You can potentially do it in a defensible manner, right? The basic rule is no. But people are still doing it because you have these regulated pharmacies that for the life of me, I can't figure out how they're doing it, that are selling it to you. So we have a lot of providers who are mitigating their risk. They're saying, I'm getting it from a regulated pharmacy, so I at least know the sourcing. I am doing my due diligence in the studies, and I want to protect my patient as much as possible because they're going to go get it from some Instagram person. And so the answer is no. You can mitigate the risk on the board defensibility, but you're still exposed on the legal civil liability aspect of it.
Okay. Understood. Yes, there are some pharmacies making these available, I've noted. And it's still, to me, it's still a gray zone. To me, I'm still going to avoid because I want something a little bit more, in stone before it all comes down to risk tolerance.
Yeah, it 100%.
Some doctors have high risk tolerance, and also depending on their state and how friendly their board is, et cetera, there's a lot of variables. So let's talk about what a lot of doctors have done since we lost access to them. A lot of them have gone to gray market peptides, but they're white labeling them in their clinics. And so the patients are getting a vial of something. It's reconstituted into liquid form in the back of the office, and they're being handed this peptide that really, it didn't come from a pharmacy. So let's talk about that, because I think that's risky. And I think a lot of doctors are doing it unknowingly. They don't realize their license is at risk.
Yeah. And I'll preface this with, I'm not a criminal attorney. I mean, I took crim law classes in law school because I had to. So that is like the extent of my knowledge here. But a bulk of this conversation does have criminal implications. And I think that's the other part that providers don't realize. I personally, and I can go on a tangent for hours about pointing the finger at the pharmacies, because I'm speaking with providers now who are telling me that their FDA regulated pharmacy is not putting research use only on that vial. It says office use only. And so now that's a whole other set of fraud, or at least my opinion is fraud. But for the white labeling that you're talking about, and kind of where it shifted to, there are criminal implications, because the core of what you have to do is inform your patient. That's the whole point of an informed consent. And signing a piece of paper doesn't absolve you of responsibilities. It's one component of protection, But that is one of the most irresponsible things that I think a provider can do. If you are going to break the rules, and there are some providers who are like, Tabitha, I appreciate the information, still going to do it. Okay. If you're going to do it, here's how to mitigate your risk. I can't condone it. I don't condone it. If you're going to break the rules, at least be honest with your patient. If they're like, yeah, you know what? It's not regulated. We don't know what the standard dosing is. We don't know what the true contraindications are, how it was going to react with these other prescriptions that I'm on. And the patient's still okay with that. Like, it's not my body. But if you are lying to your patient, that is, you are going to have a really hard time defending that to the board. And you're going to have civil liability lawsuit from your patient, and you're going to have criminal implications, the trifecta.
Wow. Because I have a lot of followers, and I will have people say, but I got, injectable BPC 157 or GHKCU from my doctor, and they handed me a vial. It looks like a prescription. I have them send me a photo, and I'm like, that's a research only peptide that they put a fancy label on that made you think it was a prescription. Or they really kind of doctor it to look like it came from a pharmacy, and it did not. And then my girlfriend, my best friend, she lives in Texas. She said, she goes, should I sign up with these doctors? She sends me the website, and there's a website advertising all these peptides that you can get a prescription for that I know are not available through compounding. Most of them are not available through compounding pharmacies. This is months ago, before the June FDA PCAC meeting. And they're selling them just blatantly on their website at MD. The MDs are managing your care. And I was like, what on earth is going on here? This is crazy.
It is. And, admittedly, when we first started completely niching into medical aesthetics a couple of years ago, I actually had somebody, I won't name names, but I had somebody that I just knew from previous life, if you will, that was like, hey, I saw you're in medical aesthetics now. By the way, I'm part of this company. Let me get you in touch with the doctor that runs it. And here's what we do with GLP-1s and X, Y, and Z. And I was like, sure, I'll have a conversation. And they're like, basically wanted an introduction to my clients. And after a couple of minutes of conversation, I realized, wait, you want to sell stuff to my clients? I thought we're not aligned here. And that's exactly what it is. And they're getting providers and I understand the injustice of it. Providers are held to different standards and they have different rules. And if you don't have a medical professional license, the reality is there are rules that you can get around. And that's what they're doing. These companies are doing what providers can't, and then roping in providers some other way to be able to say, we've got doctors that are supervising X, Y, and Z, whatever their involvement is. And so I tell all of my clients, do not do that. I would rather you, again, don't condone either of it, but I would rather you purchase from the FDA regulated pharmacy and provide something you shouldn't be providing than to go partner with these companies. Because even if they're thinking that it's like an arm's length deal, so it's okay for me, and it's not.
Right. They think that somebody else is going to take the liability. But at the end of the day, when you are a licensed prescriber, the buck stops with you. So that's another reason why I won't discuss gray market peptides on my platform, because I can't prescribe them. So I'm not going to talk, there's certain, I don't have that kind of risk tolerance. I will say though, I think a lot of practitioners are just clueless. They just don't know. They get messages from people like you were just describing in their inbox, and they think they're doing the right thing. And I've got little old lady practitioners messaging me that have been in the, field for decades. And they're like, oh, I thought I could, I'm like, what are you doing prescribing this? And they're like, oh, I just, this company sends it and we dispense it like it's a supplement, and they just don't know. So this is important information. And again, why I wanted you to come on so desperately, because people need to hear this. And I figured I've been trying to drop the hints, but I get a lot of pushback when I do. And you can imagine, I get it. I'm not trying to tattle on anyone, but I think what really got me to contact you was, I think it was Alabama. There was a doctor, was it Utah or Alabama? There was some doctor selling gray market peptides through his clinic, and he just got in a lot of trouble. And I was like, okay, well, now that I'm not a lawyer, I don't understand how your world works, but I do understand that once the precedent has been set, that tends to decide how things are decided after that. And so I thought, okay, we've got one now, now watch the dominoes fall, right?
I'm curious as to, maybe I'm a little pessimistic as to how the dominoes are going to fall, but I just don't know how statistically, like looking at the numbers, at how many providers that are doing this, how are you going to go after them all? Like what, and then for those that are legitimate, I mean, there's some that blatantly are like, I'm just doing this anyways. But for those, like you said, you little old ladies that are like, oh, I thought I could do this. I've got this. That arguably, from a lawyer's perspective, could be very defensible, right? You didn't knowingly violate the standard of care, et cetera. So how are you going to judge? Is it just going to be a rule across the board that it doesn't matter whether you did it intentionally or you were just negligent in doing it, same consequence? We don't know. I'm very curious as to how those dominoes are going to fall.
Yeah, that would be a lot of manpower for them to try to shake down everybody. But at least getting the information out there, and then people can make a decision for themselves. Yeah. The practitioners can just, after hearing what you have to say here today, they can make a decision on how they want to proceed to their risk tolerance, again, depending on their state and their board and their license, and then how the general public wants to proceed with how they interact with their doctors. It's just information.
I get hate on both sides, and I find it kind of comical. I'll have the providers that'll say, you can't tell me what to do. The FDA doesn't regulate medicine. I'm like, well, okay, do your license. And then I have providers saying, how are you over here telling people how to mitigate their risk and that they can do it? I'm like, it's not what I'm doing. I understand the reality. I'm not going to sit here in a box and say providers aren't doing it at all. So I am not going to advocate you break the law or you risk your license, but I am going to tell you what the risk is, and then you decide what your risk tolerance is. And to me, that is the most responsible thing that attorneys can do. Provide the actual information rather than a provider rely on false information and have a false sense of security. I want you to understand these are the risks. Yes, you can go to jail. Yes, you can use your license. Yes, your malpractice may not cover you. And then all of your assets could be at risk. Maybe not. I don't know. It's a case-by-case basis. Who complained? Is it just a competitor? Was there patient harm? Like, there's so many factors into what the consequences would be, but you know what the options are and you want to take that risk. It's not for me to judge.
Amen. So my background is in regenerative medicine. So I was doing prolotherapy and PRP and stem cells a long time before it got popularized. And so I understood what it meant to be practicing up against the edge of your license and what risk you were taking on and understanding risk tolerance. And I had a very good lawyer counseling me. And she always said, my job is to tell you what's going to get you in trouble that you've never thought of. Like that's what I'm here for. I'm here to let you know the things you haven't even considered and how it could play out. And your approach online, I think, is very much like that. Like, you're very reasonable and level-headed. And that's why I asked you to come on, because I am like, look, you're not fear-mongering at all, but you're definitely telling people like, hey, that, and like you said, there's a big gray zone. But once that precedent gets set, doesn't that kind of dictate how it's going to go from there? I mean, once they start making decisions about things and people actually start getting in trouble, that kind of, and I feel like that's happening to some degree.
Yeah, it definitely can. It depends on what core, not to get too far into the weeds on the legalities of it, but there's two different types of authority. There's binding and then there's persuasive. And so within your state, the higher of the courts, like every state, or not every state, I think Louisiana is a little weird, but most states have a Supreme Court within their state level, and that is going to be binding on your state. And let's say Georgia doesn't have a case like this that's gone before their court before. So they don't have any binding authority, but they can say, hey, Florida did this. I kind of like the analogy that they used. I liked the legal reasoning. That's very similar here. It's persuasive authority, and we are going to adopt it. And now it's binding on our state too. It's a very elementary explanation, but that's kind of how it works. So you're right. Yes, it does set a precedent, because the more and more that this happens, the more that other courts can say, and judges don't like being overturned, right? They have a boss, whether you think they don't or not, they have a boss. And if they can rely on other judges, then they can say, I'm not the rogue person who interpreted the law this way and got it wrong. Here are all the other states and other judges that interpreted it this way. So now I have something legitimate to rely on, and it makes it less likely that I, as the judge, am going to have my opinion overturned if this gets appealed.
And to add to that, the FDA is not someone to trifle with. I have had a few colleagues in the regenerative medicine space have the FDA show up at their office, and guess what happens? before you prove or disprove anything, they shut your office down and everybody goes home and there's no business to be had until their investigation's over. And you may be sitting there for weeks or months or however long they want to drag this out until you're up and running for business again. And then they decide whether you were at fault or not. So like, yeah, the FDA is not supposed to come in and meddle with medicine, but it happens and it's not a fun place to be. I've never been investigated, knock on wood. I've never done anything to invite them into my office, but I know people who have, and it was not a fun experience for them. So I feel like this is being in the regenerative medicine space for so long and knowing how this has gone for doctors over the past several decades, like I feel like this is, regenerative medicine adjacent. And it's kind of one of those spaces where, well, we'll get to it. We're going to talk about what happened this week. But first I want to just quickly say, because we're in this wheelhouse, you had mentioned how your disclaimers are not going to protect you. You did a reel about that, about how you can have a disclaimer. And I think you alluded to it here, informed consent. But like, just because someone signs a piece of paper, you may not be protected. Can you elaborate on that?
The way that we explain it, and having seen my social, I'm big on analogies. I think it's the best way to explain things to people. An informed consent is only one tool in your toolbox. And if all you have is a hammer, and you need to build a house, it's going to be very difficult. So you need to have as many tools as possible. And informing your patient and protecting yourself from liability has multiple parts. The consent is one of them. And on that note, I will tell you, I have seen thousands of informed consents from providers all over the US. And there have been less than a dozen that had perfect informed consents. So you're relying on a faulty document to begin with, because it's not informing your patient the way that it compliantly and legally should. But in addition to that, it's the conversation you're having with your patient. Your patient, first and foremost, that I know of, there is not a single state that allows a provider to absolve themselves from every single liability, right? You may be able to mitigate, right? We have liability waivers, but it's not 100%. And even then, there are very creative attorneys. And that's our job. Our job is literally to argue words. And so if you're in court, putting the board aside, if you're in court for a civil suit, I can take those set of words and make them very, very bulletproof and say, my client informed their patient, their informed consent was perfect. And then you have another attorney saying that is the worst informed consent I've ever seen. Here's what's missing from it. And then you leave it up to the jury who doesn't know anything, right? Or maybe a judge if it's a bench trial, but that's not going to save you. You need to first, you need to make sure that it's correct in the first place. But then there's other parts to it. Your charting, your resources, your liability waiver, your company policies, your privacy practices, all of this, they form the tools in your tool belt. And without the rest of them, you are exposed.
Something I taught doctors when I was teaching them regenerative medicine was the PAR-Q, which is just this simple acronym for what we're supposed to do as physicians. We're supposed to sit down with the patient and tell them what the procedure is or what the treatment is. We're supposed to ask them or to let them know what the alternatives are. And I think in the case of peptides, that gets very blurry, right? Because we don't have a lot of human data on that. I've used them in practice. I'm not throwing them under the bus, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. And I think it needs to be done so really transparently with the patient, not just hand them something, tell them how to inject it and good luck. The R of the PAR-Q is you have to tell them the known risks. Again, we don't have a lot of data on that with the peptides. And then you have to ask them if they have any questions. I do this verbally. I do it written. I make sure they have a written piece of paper that goes home with them, and there is an electronic copy. Like, I cover my ass. And even then, it can be picked apart in a court of law, like you're saying, even then. But still, it's amazing what happens when you give a patient a real PAR-Q. All of a sudden, they're like, oh, I have some questions. I have some thoughts. And I'm like, take your time, because it's not up to me to decide that for you, but like, here's all the information that I could possibly give you. And in a short, we can't like explain endocrinology to them in that visit. But I feel like that's missing a lot in medicine, and especially kind of in this space, because I don't think the doctors themselves are that comfortable even using most of them. A lot of these doctors are new to this and they're kind of jumping on the bandwagon, don't have a lot of clinical experience with them. And then anyway, it's anyone's bet. It's just kind of a crazy town.
It really is. When I meet with a client, I tell them, I'm like, listen, here's the unfortunate truth is that a lot of the patients, especially now, even with regenerative medicine, because it's being offered in whether you call yourself a med spa, a wellness clinic, what have you, a office that is not a traditional PCP type of office, right? It's cash based. When you operate a practice like that, the unfortunate truth is that a majority of your patients do not see this as medicine. They see it as a luxury. They see it as you're coming to make me feel better, feel younger, look younger, whatever it may be. And they don't weigh the risks the same as if they were in a hospital being told the exact same thing. So you have an affirmative duty to properly educate your patient because they're not doing it themselves. Most of the time now, I saw recently, I wish I could remember the creator's name, but is I think Dr. Brain Barbie, Brain Barbie, one of those.
Oh yeah. I like her account.
I love her. I suffer from migraine, so she's like a resource, but proves the point. She did a video this week where she talked about how majority of people they surveyed, and I think it was like 30-something% of people actually take medical advice from social media.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it, at least 30% of your patients are coming in with a preconceived notion of what this treatment is based on what they've seen on social media and have decided this is the treatment for me. But it's your responsibility as the provider to educate them, to assess the risk, make sure they truly understand. And I tell all of my clients, trust your gut. If you think this client is patient is just pushing it, oh, they really, really want it, and they keep saying, I saw it here, I saw this, I saw that, and you really are like, I mean, you could get it, but I don't think it's in your best interest to get it, you have the absolute right to refuse to treat them. And you should, because it's just not worth the $1,000 you might get for that patient.
Yep. Totally. I totally agree with you. I am a big fan of turning patients away when it's not the right fit or something. My hackles go up. Something isn't right, and that's okay to do too. Something I want to touch on, which just to make sure that we include it in this episode, is another phenomenon that's happening. I don't know if you know about this. You probably do. There are these companies popping up that their website looks very official. It looks like they're medically supervised. They might even have a nurse practitioner on staff, but they're all gray market peptides being sold kind of under the guise of medical supervision, but it's not really, because I know people who've gone through them and have had horrific side effects, and they come to me with the side effects, and I'm like, well, stop doing that. Stop taking that for one. Where did you get this? They send me pictures of the vial, and it's this illusion of medical supervision. And what you've got is a nurse practitioner that might answer a text or something. There's absolutely no true clinical oversight. That is even scarier because I don't think the general public can navigate that very well. I'm not saying people are stupid, but it's, I've even known smart friends that were like, is this real? Is this legit? And I'm like, that is not medical supervision. What's going on here? So can you speak to that at all? Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with it. It's very similar to the companies that are kind of roping providers in and saying like, hey, if you put our affiliate link on your website, here's kind of how your patients can get it, but you're not prescribing it. It's a similar, to me, fraudulent situation. What the repercussions are, I couldn't even begin to tell you. I mean, judging on its face is from the ones that I've seen, at the very least, it's false advertising or misleading advertising. And that's just the bare minimum, because then you get into sourcing and where are these products coming from, and is it being regulated, and who's actually writing the script, who is all of the different factors. And so it definitely is something that I would not recommend any provider get involved with. I wouldn't recommend any patient. I understand some people are desperate when it comes to their health, and I understand that, right? You've struggled with weight all your life, or maybe you've had chronic pain all your life, but the risk in these particular situations is just not worth the very, very likely consequences.
And there's not even a script. Like it's literally just somebody owns a peptide company. They start an outward public facing website company, and then they just sell gray market peptides just straight across the board. But it doesn't look like you're going to a gray market peptide research only. Those sites are kind of obvious to me now. I know when I've landed on one. These are literally under the guise of like, let us help moms. There's one that's specific to helping burned out moms, and they're sending them gray market peptides with no medical supervision. It's crazy. There's another version of this I want to ask you about, and I shall not name names, but there are a couple companies out there that are almost structured like an MLM, and they are getting influencers, Fitspo, ex-Beach Body Girls, to share their affiliate link, and then you are, through that affiliate link, and unfortunately these Fitspo influencers are using my education to sell this on my original education around GLP-1s and microdosing. They sell them onto this link. This link takes them to some telemedicine company that is legitimately writing scripts for only the things that you can get scripts for. And then these influencers are getting a kickback, which I understood as fee splitting and not legal. But I guess if it's not practitioner to practitioner, it's considered marketing dollars. But I know practitioners doing it. So that to me is like, that's probably not legal. And then on top of it, you can build like your downline, if you will, which the whole thing just, that grosses me out to no end. And this one company in particular has been using my face and my likeness on their social media. And so people think I'm affiliated with them and I am not. Anyway, what do you think of all that?
I could go on, and we could do a whole podcast on that because it infuriates me. It's another one of those situations where they're getting around the rules. Because when I first heard about them, I was like, this is fee splitting. I don't understand how this is legal. But obviously they're doing it. And the more and more research that we did in our company to figure out, because we were having clients asking like, hey, we're getting approached. Is this okay? And we're like, let's just pause. Okay. And we did a super, super in-depth deep dive, and they are tech companies. That's how they're getting around it. They're tech companies. They are not medical companies. Personally, I'm like, if a provider were to, there are situations like this, right? So let's take the med spa world, for example. If you, here in Florida, if you are predominantly doing aesthetics, then you fall under certain regulations, right? So what some of our clients will be like, well, I'm going to say that I'm not going to say I'm a med spa. I'm going to say I'm a wellness clinic. And I'm like, listen, here's the thing. When it comes to court enforcement for the board or like a traditional civil court, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a freaking duck. And the law is not going to let you be cute with it. They're going to go harder on you because now you're trying to make them look stupid. So how in the world is it that companies like this, I don't understand, maybe there's some, big investigation that's going on in the background that I'm not privy to, and they will come down on them, but it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. It is fee splitting. I don't know how else, logically you can see it.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Because I've been beating this drum for months now and talking about it, and people just get so mad at me. Explain what fee splitting is and why it's illegal.
So it is a little nuanced. And one thing that I really want to share here, because a lot of providers aren't aware of this, they're like, oh, well, I don't fall under Stark laws, right? Because there are certain requirements. So fee splitting at its core is medical providers are not allowed to either pay someone for a referral or get paid for a referral. That's the cut of it. And so the main federal law is Stark law, but even if you don't trigger Stark law, right? Maybe you're not falling under that umbrella. Pretty much every state has its own consumer protection laws and fee splitting laws. And it is illegal so for example, let's say you have an esthetician, you have a med spa, you have an esthetician, and that esthetician is only doing facials, but then they upsell that patient to Botox. And for every patient they upsell to Botox, I, the provider or owner, I'm going to give that esthetician 5% of that cost of Botox. That's fee splitting. You're giving somebody who is not a medical provider, who had no involvement in the treatment, because in some situations, it's even if they are a medical provider not involved in the treatment, you can't share in that fee. And that's illegal, whether it's a state law that you're violating or federal laws. It is not permissible whatsoever. And that's exactly what's going
Yes.
on with these companies. As they're like, hey, get them to sign up on this link and then get other people to sign up under you. And the more people you have under you, the more money we're going to give you because of the money we're making off of this patient. It's fee splitting.
It's fee splitting, 100%. So when your favorite influencer tells you to go check out their link, and they send you over to this place that is actually doing telemedicine, and trust me, they're getting a kickback. And that's not, if another way that I explain it to folks is, if you are sending a patient for a service or a prescription medication or something like that, medical care, and you're getting a cutback. Like if I were to send somebody to a imaging center, that's something I've seen done with imaging centers will get different practitioners to only refer there, and then they give them a financial incentive back. And that's how businesses grow, right? That's how entrepreneurialism is, but it is not legal in medicine. And so, your hands are tied. You can't be doing that. Now you can send them there because they're going to get good service and they're going to get good quality care, but you do not get a payment back from that company for sending them a patient that undergoes medical care. And that's exactly what these companies are doing especially with this GLP-1 space. It's sketchy.
That's an understatement, but yes.
I'm so glad that we're on the same team. I knew it. I've been watching your stuff for months, and I'm like, this is the girl. I got to get her on the show.
when I saw the DM, so Channing, she works with us. She helps me monitor all the messages we get, and she's like, Dr. Tina DM'd you, and I was like, really? As I hopped in, I was like, yes. The answer, absolutely. The answer is yes. It's yes.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm so honored. Okay, so before we wrap up, because I want to be respectful of your time, let's talk about what happened this week with the whole Retatrutide thing.
This is the perfect situation to emphasize the fact that you can be potentially, I'm not saying it is, defensively compliant, but you still have civil lawsuits. And that's what Eli Lilly is doing. Eli is saying, hey, I don't care how safe you might be in prescribing this to your patient, what have you, you are not legally allowed to do it. That's ours. It's still in clinical trials. It's false marketing. There's 3 claims in total that are the core of the suit. But at the main principle is that's ours, not yours. You don't have the right to offer it. It doesn't matter if it's within the scope of your license to prescribe and administer it. You have no legal right to offer it. And a lot of people that I have spoken to, I mean, we've probably talked about this 15 times by now in the last hour. They're like, I know the risk, but I'll still take it. I'm like, okay, as long as you understand, it's not just defending against the board. It's also civil liability. And then everybody thinks that they're the exception to the rule until you're not.
Yeah, it's crazy. So they went after gray market companies. They went after telemedicine practices. They went after,
Providers.
Did they go after individual providers? Yeah. I mean, it was big. I went through, somebody did a breakdown of it, and it was a lot.
Yeah.
Like this was a organized and concerted. I think they're going to keep coming, and I don't blame them. That's their patent. That's their,
Exactly.
They have created it. I understand why they don't. I mean, is it fair that people may not be able to afford it or access it? That's a whole other conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes down to just the legalities of it, I wouldn't touch that. That's why my followers, I'll say this here, my followers have been incessantly on me about doing content around this particular medication. And I'm like, no, because it's not out yet. It's not available for me to prescribe. Therefore, I don't have an opinion on it yet. I can tell you what the phase 3 trials have been saying. I can tell you, what the objective findings are in the trials, but I'm not touching this. I do not need to be on the receiving end of that problem with that company. So yeah, they really, just in a nutshell, they really cracked down hard in the last week. It's like, it was a blitzkrieg. They came at them hard and fast.
What I'm curious to see is this just the first domino, or did they just kind of strike super hard to instill fear in everyone else? And I mean, time will tell, but it is very possible that whatever work went on behind the scenes is still ongoing, so that they can rope in other companies and other providers, Or they could just say, let's really make an example out of these people and instill like the terror into anybody else who even thinks about doing this. We'll see. But statistically, I understand the risk too. Like I understand and that's where a lot of providers get it wrong. And I will never, I'm not a medical provider. I joke that I went to law school, so I didn't have to do math or science, and I do math and science every day in my career now. But I'm still not a medical provider. So I have clients who are like, this product is amazing. And this is what the studies are showing. And I feel that I can safely monitor my patient. I'm like, that's great. The board might agree with you. If you want to take that risk, go for it. Just know I would recommend calling your insurance carrier and seeing, are you going to cover me if I get sued, not just by malpractice, but also civilly? Call your commercial liability carrier, because it's not a one size fits all legal risk analysis.
Well, what I've been telling anyone that will listen to me for months, I knew this was coming. I knew it was going to be swift and furious. I knew it. I just knew it. You do not get on the bad end of these companies. And there's too much on the line for them they're trying to get this pushed through as a biologic so that it can't be considered a peptide and compounded. I get what they're doing. They're smart. And so I'm not, you know what? I'm not judging on either side. Like, I get it. I am an entrepreneur myself. I understand. However, I've been telling all of my colleagues that will listen, like, if you have any content out there on this topic, take it down. Like, if you're trying to promote it as something that you offer, get rid of that content. This is not something you want to get in the crosshairs of. I told you offline, it's like that Homer Simpson meme where you're just trying to back into the bushes. I'm just reporting on it here. That's what we're doing today, is reporting, not judging. But man, it's getting hairy out there. So I'm trying, I've got a private community where I speak to people. I'm still very careful in there. I'm still not breaking any rules just because we're behind a paywall, because I know anyone can join. But at least I can speak a little more freely than a censored platform that many of these are. And so I've got that I've got a school over there. I'll put this link in the show notes for people who want to come have conversations somewhere where it's a little more safe. But yeah, it's the Wild West. And I'm really glad that there's lawyers out there helping doctors navigate this, because it seems like it's a topic that a lot of lawyers either don't know anything about or don't want to touch. So good on you for making it the focus of what you're doing.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate that I was at the American Bar Association Health Law Conference earlier this year, and they finally had a medical aesthetic component of it. And I was talking to, the different attorneys and the different regulators that were there, and they said they had to fight for it because it's not a big part of healthcare law. And I'm like, that's very unfortunate, because now all of these providers don't have the guidance that we can give them. And so there's another attorney, I think she's based out of Texas or Tennessee. She does like M&A work for medical aesthetics. So she's in a similar world. And she had reached out to me to talk earlier this week. And she's like, yeah, I think there's like 5 of us. And we kind of were listing the main companies that do this. And I'm like, it's unfortunate. I do encourage any young lawyer who is interested in healthcare law. This is an area where there is significant need. I talk to people all the time in other states that are like, I'm so glad I found you. I've called so many attorneys in my state that don't know the answer, or I've paid attorneys that gave me wrong answers. And I'm like, well, I'm not an attorney in your state, but I can give you some educational materials. Like, that's the best I can do for you. So, the more attorneys that can gravitate towards this, the more providers we can help. And the closer I get to my goal of having a national standard that providers can rely on.
Yeah, we need it. We need it. There is too few. Well, being in the regenerative medicine space, I can tell you that my entire career was just one big, we don't know. It's just one big, we don't know. And I hold a chiropractic license, or I did up until recently. I let it go, but I also hold a naturopathic license. And so there was a lot of, even with malpractice companies, like, well, we don't know. There weren't enough NDDCs out there it's just, you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants. And that's not a great place to be when you don't have good decision-making skills, or you don't understand risk tolerance, because it's the more success you have, difference in risk tolerance. When I was young and hungry and starting out, I cared less. And I know practitioners who are making a lot of money doing things that maybe are a little bit on the edge or, kind of this gray zone, and they don't care because there's so much money that they know that they can fight it. And so there's differences here. And then I'm right in the middle, and I'm just like, what, I'm going to be Homer Simpson.
Yeah.
Going behind the bushes, just leave me out of it. Yeah. Because I want a nice, happy life, and I don't want to be on the receiving end of Eli Lilly again.
Oh, for sure. It's not a fun place to be. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is having people build compliance into the business. It's a habit. It's not just papers that you keep in a file and show when you need it and have patients sign. And so on the peptide topic, I hosted a webinar this week on peptide compliance. And, one of the things that I went through with everyone was, listen, I can't condone this. It's not my reflection of whether I think the peptide is good or bad. It's a reflection of the risk, and legally, can you do this? So no, but if you don't want to listen to me and you're going to do it anyways, here's how to mitigate the risk. Here are the steps you can take so that if you do get punished for it, you can not get the highest penalty. That is separate, though, from what Eli Lilly can do, right? That's bound that you're talking civil lawsuits.
Yes.
And so balancing both of those risks, I think that there's a big misconception that if I am doing this as safely as possible and I'm meeting the standard of care in my definition of it, then I'm safe. And to your point about, providers out there who are making a lot of money, everybody thinks they're the exception to the rule. And the longer that you go without any consequence, the safer you feel, the more risk tolerant you become. And I mean, I preach, again, I get hate. People be like, well, you're just telling us this because you want us to come pay you. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, I'm a business, of course, right? You want your patients to pay you for your services. I was like, but at the same time, what I'm saying is not a lie. It is true. A lot of providers don't see legal as an investment. They see it as an expense. And then the more you do it, there's a provider, I want to say Nebraska, that was one of the example cases they talked about at the health law conference, because this provider, he was making so much money for years and he was white labeling and he wasn't being truthful, right? This was during that period that we talked about earlier today. And he just got too comfortable and kept taking more and more and more risks, never invested and he thought he was the exception to the rule. Everyone does. Or you think, it's okay, I've got enough money to defend it. Okay, but what about the criminal you can't buy your way out of jail. You can't.
Yeah, right. And also your poor adrenal glands and stress tolerance. That's always it for me. It's like, I don't want to deal with any of this nonsense. Like I'm fine. I'm fine doing what I'm doing, saying what I'm saying over here. And I'm being careful. And every single day, my friends will tell you, my colleagues that dabble in this space will tell you, I have come in like mother hen a few times into their DMs and I'm like, take it down. Don't take that down. Their biggest concern is Instagram going to ban my account? And I'm like, that's the least of your worries.
Don't
be on the list. Just don't be on the list. I don't want to be on any of the lists. And I end up on all the lists by accident. And I'm like, don't pull me into this.
Yeah. There's so many other things. Like that is very low on what you should be concerned about.
Yeah. But they just don't know. And it's not because they're not smart. They're just not thinking of it. And I think it goes back to my childhood. I hate getting in trouble. I hate it. And so I've always avoided getting in trouble. And in fact, I've probably turned down a lot of money over the years because it just sniffed of me potentially getting in trouble somehow. I didn't know how. I was just like, I don't know, this doesn't line up for me. So I've turned away a lot of offers especially in the last couple of years around this topic of GLP-1s. And I just don't want to I don't need any trouble. I like my life. I like it simple. I'm trying to decrease my liability more and more each year. So
you sound like my law partner, like my co-founder. He's also my husband, but that is him. Whereas I was the opposite. I have an older sister, and I would watch my older sister get in trouble. And I would see, and I think I was just like naturally born to be a lawyer because I would see the punishment that she got. I would see how my mom, because I was raised in a single family home or single parent home, and I'd see how did my mom articulate the rule that my sister broke. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to do that, but I can do these other things because you didn't say I couldn't do those. And so that's what I help our clients do with like, hey, listen, I can get creative with it. Here's the risk. I'm going to tell you what the risk is. I'm never going to tell you it's legal because that person got in trouble for this. So you'll probably get in trouble for this too. But here's the defense if you want it. So my husband, my co-founder and I, we balance each other really well because he'll be like, and he's like, no, you're not doing that. Like, okay.
I love that. That's great. Well, as my CPA will say, I can't defend that. If he can, he can. If he can't, he can't. And my lawyer would say that too. Like, that's not defensible. I'm like, okay, we're not doing it. We're not doing, staying out of trouble.
That's my barometer personally. I tell my clients, I'm like, listen, if I could not stand in front of the board with a straight face and give what I firmly believed was a good faith defense as to why you did what you did, I'm never going to say, here is a potential way to mitigate your risk. But if I can say, here is a legitimate, I wouldn't recommend you do it still, but here's a really good defense if you do decide to do it. But it always has to be like, could I actually stare the administrative board or the jury in the face, the judge in the face, and truly believe like this was a defense and it's a good faith defense.
I think that's a good way to do things. I love it. Okay, well, where can everyone find you so that they can get all the goodness? I know you had that webinar. I was not able to make it in time, and I would like to attend a future one. And I know your social media is awesome. So where can everyone find you?
They can find me Entrepreneur ESQ on Instagram and on TikTok, so Entrepreneur Esquire. And also you can find us online at sbttlaw.com.
Okay, great. And are you not available in all 50 states? Are you, just so they know and they don't inundate you? Where can you not help practitioners?
Within the state of Florida, we 100% can be your attorneys. Outside the state of Florida, we do provide educational materials and consulting. The boundary is I can't give you specifics. I can't say in your specific situation, here's what you could do. I can say in Tennessee, here's what the law is, and here are the rules that a provider needs to follow. So we definitely do work within all 50 states. We just always make sure and emphasize the difference because people see the Esquire and they're like, oh, you're my attorney. I'm like, no, I'm not. We're not your attorney. I can connect you with an attorney in your state. I've got a big network, but no, ma'am.
Fair enough. Okay, well, I love it. I'll make sure all the links are in the show notes so everybody comes and follows you because it's great information. If you're just interested in peptides, I would follow, even if you're not a practitioner, because the information needs to be understood so that you guys know what you're getting into when you walk into your doctor's office, even if your doctor doesn't know. So I will leave it at that. Thank you so much for taking the time today and coming on the show. And I hope you'll come back in the future when, I think things are going to change a lot in the next year. So we'll have to do an update in part 2.
I agree. And thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation. I really enjoy these types of conversations. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Tina Show. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson. Theme song is by John the Guilt. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can email the podcast at podcast@drtina.com. That's DRTYNA. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find all of my offerings on my website at drtina.com. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practices of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is intended not to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.